Welcome back to the Strategy Show. In this episode, we're looking at breaking down a true classic, Michael Porter's 1985 value chain model. This model is the secret behind how the great companies, how they win. Have you ever looked at a company and just thought, how do they do it? They seem to have this magic formula for success, even while everyone else is just trying to keep their heads above water. Just look at the massive tech giants like Apple and Samsung. Their success is no accident. It's not luck. It's a very deliberate, formally structured process. What we're going to try and do in this episode is demystify exactly how companies transform raw materials, add strategic value to them, and ultimately turn a profit using the value chain. Because as a model, it forces a total shift in perspective. It moves businesses away from just analyzing a static balance sheet and moves them towards mapping out the dynamic sequence of actions that a company takes to build an advantage. So let's try and unpack this. The core premise that Porter lays out is that a business isn't just a collection of departments, it's a living system. The big idea here, the really important thing to see, is how the value chain splits everything a company does into two main categories. First up, we've got what are called primary activities. Think of this as the main show, the stuff that's front and center. These are all the hands-on tasks that are directly about making and selling your product. You take inputs, you transform them into outputs, and you add enough value along the way that customers are willing to pay more for the final product. Porter breaks this transformation down into 5 very strictly ordered primary activities. If we look at a motor car manufacturing company, for example, there's a very deliberate sequence that they go through. They start with inbound logistics, so storing rubber and metal and glass and plastic. Then they move to operations, the actual factory assembly of the car. Outbound logistics is then shipping the car to the dealers. We have marketing and sales to build demand for the car. And finally, we have service, like handling warranties, spare parts, or dealing with complaints and queries. And each of those sequential steps compounds the value of the raw materials moving through the system and makes the end consumer willing to pay a little bit more for that end product. So obviously, you'd pay more for a completed car than you would for a pile of metal, rubber, and glass raw materials. And you'd pay even more if there's a warranty on that car in case it broke down as soon as you bought it. Each step in the primary activities, in theory, adds value to the end consumer. But all of that, what we would think of as being, I guess, the core of the organization, according to the value chain, is just one piece of the puzzle. The real magic with this model happens when you layer on the next part of the framework. This is Porter's second group, the support or secondary activities, the behind-the-scenes work. If the primary activities are the main show, these are the backstage crew. They're not on stage building the product themselves, but without them, the show would absolutely fall apart. This is your HR, your human resources, your tech development, your finance, all that infrastructure stuff that makes the primary work. These secondary activities run across the entire value chain. They're procurement, technology development, human resources, and firm infrastructure, just to nail that down. The model elevates these roles from just being back office administration and recognizes them as being absolutely strategically vital. Take HR, for instance. Porter positions HR as being absolutely incredibly vital to the operations of a business. By handling the training of assembly line staff and navigating complex union negotiations, HR directly dictates the efficiency and success of the primary operations, whether that's kind of operations themselves, inbound or outbound logistics, marketing. It's all about getting the right people in the right place with the right skills, which is absolutely critical. Or take technology development. This makes sure you've got the right systems to monitor our raw materials and inbound logistics to reduce waste. And it makes sure we have automated assembly lines in our factories to efficiently and cheaply build the cars that we're going to sell. So the secondary activities, for all we call them secondary, are incredibly important. It's worth mentioning here that the value chain isn't just a framework for massive industrial factories, even though that's maybe how it was initially designed. It maps perfectly to the modern service economy. Take a high level accounting firm. Their inbound logistics is simply intaking a client's raw financial records, and then operations will be converting that data into polished financial statements. So the underlying mechanics of creating value for the end customer is identical. So, what's the point of mapping our business using the value chain? The value chain helps us in lots of different ways. First and foremost, it helps us to understand what's actually going on inside our organization. This will let us look honestly at each of these primary and secondary activities and try and figure out what our strengths and weaknesses are in each one. Do we have great machinery in operations but poor maintenance, which leads us to kind of breakdowns in our production processes? Understanding these issues and looking at how to improve them is critical to the efficiency and the success of our organisation. A classic example of this is British Airways. For efficiency and cost efficiency, they wanted to speed up how fast they could get their planes ready for the next flight. So, who did they study? Other airlines? No, they actually studied Formula One pit crews. They used that to streamline their operations, see where they were inefficient, and boost their competitive advantage in the airline industry. Understanding the activities in the chain will also let you exploit what Porter calls linkages. This refers to how investing heavily in one activity may help to optimize another. So each of the activities can't necessarily just be viewed in isolation. For example, putting major capital into technology development for a superior initial product design could massively reduce the downstream cost of after-sales service and warranty claims. Or maybe you spend a little more on better materials at the beginning. That could lead to fewer customer service calls later on. That's a linkage. You're working to make decisions that optimize the whole chain, not just one piece. And that is incredibly hard for competitors to copy. It's worth, I think, highlighting here how much of the modern linkages actually rely on IT too. Things like, RFID tags that automatically track inventory from a warehouse right to the consumer, which then instantly links outbound logistics directly back to procurement and gives us a lot more information to kind of work with. Mapping the value chain also forces a business to make a major strategic decision, which is about whether we outsource some of our functions or not. When you isolate every activity, you suddenly see which ones actually create a competitive edge and which are just operational drag. We can look at each of the activities in the value chain and ask ourselves, is this particular activity critical to what makes us special? Is it something that really adds value and matters to the end customer? And is it something we do really well? If it's not crucial to our success and it doesn't really matter to the end consumer, then that kicks up the next question. Could a partner organization do that particular activity better, faster, or cheaper than us? If we have a product, for example, that doesn't really need much after sales care, is there any point running a whole call center ourselves? Or should we just outsource that to a specialist company instead? And this is where the value chain framework is just perfect, a decision on what to outsource. But it's a decision that needs to be taken very carefully. Because yes, outsourcing can save you money and let you focus on what you do best. But remember the downsides. You can lose control over quality for that particular function. Your internal team could lose important skills because you've basically given the job to somebody outside the company to do. And you might even risk your secret sauce, your intellectual property, because you're sharing specialist knowledge potentially with third-party suppliers. It's a huge trade-off. So what's the bottom line for outsourcing? Well, actually, it's pretty simple, but so important. Here's the golden rule. You never outsource the thing that gives you your competitive advantage. Full stop. And if you do decide to outsource something non-critical, you need to manage those partners with rock-solid service agreements to protect yourself and ensure that they keep up their end of the agreement. So what does all this mean? If we connect to the bigger picture, Porter's model is ultimately about identifying the activities that drain your resources but don't add competitive advantage, which we can then consider outsourcing or automating, as well as identifying your value drivers, the amazing, important activities that allow you to charge a premium for your product, attract customers, and that you need to focus on ruthlessly optimizing and focus your strategies on improving. Finally, in this episode, we need to consider the last implication of Porter's value chain, which is the value system. So far, we've been looking inside the company, but now what we need to do is zoom out, because the truth is, no company is an island. Your company's value chain is really just one link in a much bigger chain that we call the value system. Think about it. Your value chain is connected to your suppliers' value chains because you procure goods from them that then come into your inbound logistics. It's connected to your distributors' value chains through your outbound logistics. All of that connects to your customers. It's a whole ecosystem. And this is where the true masters of the game play. They don't just focus on making their own little chain perfect. They manage the linkages across the entire system. They orchestrate the whole network of suppliers and partners. And when you can do that, that's how you build a competitive advantage that's almost impossible for anyone else to replicate easily. And it extends well beyond a single company. Porter introduced the extended value system, pointing out that, for example, a high-end restaurant's quality actually relies on a specific farmer growing their ingredients. We're all integrated into a larger chain, and the key to success is understanding that and managing the whole supply chain we're part of. Thanks to everyone listening for joining me on this short episode. I hope you found it useful and hopefully interesting. If you have been listening, remember to follow us so you get notified of future episodes as they drop. And I'll see you next time.